Hey friends, we're back outside with my sun worshiper friends, Molly. Oh, she's wiggling her tail, she heard her name. And Lenny. And we'll continue on with our reading. The wiffle bird should be along fairly soon, declared the professor. She's insatiably curious. She's bound to know we're here. Lindy said, "It's awfully quiet, isn't it? I mean, there aren't any birds singing or anything. All I can hear is the river." The professor looked anxiously around. "I'd noticed that too, Lindy. It is unusual." Lindy sniffed the air. "I smell fresh bread." "It's the flowers," replied the professor. "You're kidding. Can I pick one and see?" "No, I wouldn't pick one, Lindy. It would only die, and Wangdoodle Land is a place for living things. But you can certainly smell the flowers." Lindy bent and put her face close to a bright yellow bloom that was growing beside the path. "It does smell of baked bread," she said. "Do all the flowers smell like that?" "You'll see," said the professor. "Look at the signpost," Tom said. He pointed to a post looking at a fork in the path. Its 4 arms were decorated with elaborate signs. "Ploy, Gambit, the Stump, the River," Ben read aloud. "What does it mean?" "There are some of the places we will have to pass in order to reach the Wangdoodle," replied the professor. As they walked, the sound of the water grew louder. Soon the children were standing by the edge of the river. "Where does it go?" asked Lindy. "I think it flows through the forest of the tree squeaks, but after that, I don't know." "Tree squeaks? Rather nasty little creatures, Ben. I hope we can avoid them." "Are they dangerous?" Lindy asked quickly. "I've never met them, Lindy, but I've heard their terrible tattletales." Tom said, "Why does the river make that sweet singing noise?" "If you think that's unusual, put your hand in the water and stir it around," said the professor. Tom knelt at the river's edge and splashed with his hand. The movement made the river change its gentle tune to a series of thrilling, rippling sounds. The professor bent and picked up a stone. "Here, Lindy, throw this. See what happens." She hurled the stone as far as she could. It landed in the water with a splash, and chords of music rang in the air for several sounds. Ben said, "That's incredible. I don't understand why that should happen." "Well, why not?" replied the professor. "I told you not to expect anything ordinary in Wangdoodle Land." He shielded his eyes. "Look, children," he cried excitedly. "Look! The wiffle bird is coming!" In the distant sky, something was rolling and tumbling and soaring and dipping in the most peculiar manner. The professor chuckled. "She never flies properly. I don't know how she manages at all, really. She has so many feathers, you see. She's totally uncoordinated." The wiffle bird made a stumbling and very undignified landing onto the branch of a nearby tree and proceeded to shake and shuffle herself into some kind of order. It was not until she settled down that the children were able to see how truly beautiful she was. Her plumage was a brilliant rainbow of colors: red, pink, yellow, orange, and purple. She was a silky bird, rustling and smooth, and she gave out a delicate perfume that reminded the children of orange blossoms on a sunny summer evening. "Greetings, my dear wiffle bird," said the professor. "It is a great pleasure to see you again. Won't you come down and join us? I would like to introduce you to my friends." The bird jumped a foot into the air as he spoke, and every feather flew up and got tangled and had to be rearranged all over again. She retreated along the branch, making odd little humming sounds. The professor stepped forward. "You're looking very pretty," he said. "In fact, I don't think I've ever seen you look so lovely. Dear wiffle bird, sweet wiffle bird, won't you come down and say hello?" The wiffle bird gave a few startled squeaks and turned around and around on the branch. It was impossible for the children to tell which end of her was which. Quite suddenly she leaned forward, or perhaps it was backward, and somersaulted out of the tree and down to the ground, landing just in front of the professor. "That's very gracious of you," the professor said. "The children and I are so glad you came by. May I introduce Miss Melinda Potter?" Lindy knelt beside the professor. "Hello, wiffle bird. You're the prettiest thing I have ever seen." The wiffle bird began her humming sounds again. These young gentlemen are Benjamin and Thomas Potter. How do you do? Ben said courteously. Tom felt a trifle embarrassed and said in a gruff voice, Hello, bird. All of a sudden, the children noticed two tiny bird-like hands coming through the beautiful feathers. As if holding a curtain to one side, the hands parted the waving plumage, and they saw two jet-black, beady eyes peering out of them. Lindy cried, Oh, Professor, how sweet is she? I wish there was something I could give her. What does she like to eat? Just feed her compliments and she'll be perfectly happy. Tom said dryly, In that case, she's probably full up already. The wiffle bird suddenly flew into the air and landed on Tom's shoulder. He was taken completely by surprise. Here, get off, he said in a startled voice. The professor grinned. She likes you, Tom, and that's a great compliment. Let me just adjust my sleeping beauties here. Aren't they funny? They love the sunshine. Tom was embarrassed. Listen, I like her too, but she's got to get down. He looked at the bird, now only inches away from his face. The tiny hands appeared again, and the button eyes stared at him without blinking. The professor and the children doubled up with laughter. Once she takes a fancy to someone, Tom, she never changes her mind. You're stuck with her. I'm afraid. Before Tom could protest further, a dreadful, dry, rattling sound came from somewhere across the fields of waving flowers. The wiffle bird stiffened and then flew into the air. Mayday! She shrieked, an incredibly shrill voice. What does that mean? Gasped Lindy. Mayday is a recognized international call for help. I fear we are in for a surprise. The horrible sound came again, but closer this time. Tom, climb the tree and tell me if you can see anything, commanded the professor. The boy did as he was told. There's a big cloud of dust out there, and it's moving, he yelled. It's coming our way. Lindy took hold of the professor's hand and held it tightly. I think I'm going to be frightened, she said. Lindy, you must try hard not to be, because that is exactly what the proc would want. This is his work. I know it. I can see something now, cried Tom. Hundreds of strange-looking animals. What do they look like? Weird, like huge anteaters. No, more like cannons. But instead of wheels, they have 5 legs in a circle on either side. Sidewinders, declared the professor. That devil has sent the sidewinders to drive us away. What are they? Asked Ben in consternation. They're the Wangdoodle's private guard. I've never seen them, but they have a nasty reputation. Ben cried. There they are, Professor. Look! In the distance, a company of extraordinary creatures was marching towards them. They did look like cannons. Their long, funnel noses were held rigidly in the air at a 45-degree angle. They moved with a rolling, thrashing gait, their 5 legs churning at either side of their mud-brown bodies. The noise they made was constant and terrifying. Tom scurried down the tree. The professor put his arms around the children to make sure that they still felt safe. He told them he'd always protect them. The wiffle bird shrieked at the top of her voice, Stand and deliver! Then she flapped away in a panic-stricken fashion up the river. The sidewinders were so close now that their staring eyes and slobbering mouths could be clearly seen. Above the roar, percussion music began. The moving sea of creatures shifted and bunched together. As their bodies touched, bright sparks flew in all directions and they began to glow. First green, then red, then green again, and blue. Lindy could stand it no longer. Professor, she cried, I can't look at them. I want to go home. She began to weep and her thumb went into her mouth. We shall, Lindy, we shall. You don't have to look, but you must not move. It is imperative that we obey the wiffle bird and stand our ground. The sidewinders were almost on top of them. They could see the warts on the creature's sandpaper skin. Their long trunks towered above their heads, and their hot breath singed the leaves off the purple tree. The earth shook from the marching of so many hundreds of feet. Lindy screamed. Just as it seemed as the professor and the children must be trampled to death, there was a mighty crash of cymbals, and the entire army turned and headed towards the river. Ben cried out in relief. They turned! How come they turned? They were only sent to frighten us. Lindy opened her eyes. Tom suddenly grew very daring. He took a step forward and glared at a passing sidewinder. Boo! He yelled. The creature looked extremely startled and backed into a sidewinder behind it. This started a chain reaction, and all of a sudden, chaos reigned. Sidewinders went tumbling and falling all over each other, and in their efforts to get out of the way, they bonked. The music ran down like an old record. The drums stopped, and the creatures piled one on top of the other as they reached the river's edge. They fell with colossal splashes into the garden, swirling around, swirling water, and there was a terrible discordant of sounds. The professor said firmly, Now, children, is the time to move. Run home as fast as you can. The boys needed no second bidding. Grabbing Lindy by the hand, they raced with her along the path they had traveled earlier. The professor, showing surprising agility for someone his age, kept up with them all the way. In no time at all, they burst through the hedge and into his garden, safe at last. Come on back for chapter 3. Bye, Molly. Molly. Oh, she's too tired. Bye, Molly.